All right. Hello, world. We're doing another Truthfire Journal today, and we'll be focusing on authors, the writing bubble. I am Naji Coach, and with me I have Nijai Maya, who has a passion for writing herself, and we're going to jam with us together. All right.
Awesome.
Okay, so I thought I'd just quickly go over some of the principles of bubble reading, because that may be new to you. Did it make sense what I sent over in the email?
Yeah, it did.
Okay, cool. So I'll go real quick then, just for people watching. First is that because there's a lot to do and some of them will have more or less media than others, we go for lowest hanging fruit first and use that to leverage into the more challenging samples. Challenging samples include lower media, but also ones that you and I may have like a personal interest in, or they may be like a keystone to a certain genre. A lot of times that, the importance of what they may or may not be makes them a little heavier to do, but doable. Let's see. Also, we want to get our own samples that we find personally interesting, but we want to cover the whole bubble in general. That is the overall purpose. And the individual samples, like say George Martin or whoever you may personally find interesting, they get a better context if they get all the other samples in there as well. It gives them a better framing.
Right.
Let's see what else. Big one is that when we're doing this, we're going to kind of relax our reading firmness on the samples we'll be doing and samples that have come prior as far as confirmations. So we can kind of just put everything out in like a loose formation, and then once everything's unpacked, we'll start to firm them up. And then what else? Yes, one thing as part of that, there's two things. One is that if there's any maybe conflicts with prior confirmations, it allows that to not be so much an issue. And there's a lot that we'll be doing, a large number of reads, and so it's good to kind of just chop those numbers down a little bit to get that weight off of us. And those,
just to clarify,
sure.
Let's say we see an author and we read them as Naji, for example, and then we realize, hey, this person riffs like somebody else who was read as Nijai. Do we go back to the Nijai to see if they need to be purified, or do we just leave that for now?
We will leave it for now, but we will note that, and for sure, we'll hit it. So to answer your question, anything that tickles us like that, good question. We'll go ahead and start making a list of things that we definitely want to revisit when it comes to purification, so we don't miss anything.
Okay.
Good question. And then last but not least is that something you were already kind of getting into is in bubble reading, you're reading the individual samples, but also the trends, all the various trends that go into it. And authors will be one of the more challenging bubbles that way, because there's going to be a lot of sub-trends, both regions of the world, genres of writing, all kinds of things that will affect demographic. All right, that may be it. All right, cool. Here we go. So, alrighty. So I have 20 for us to look at today, new drops. We'll go ahead and get started. And so anything that you have to add as we go along, please just go ahead and jump in. I would appreciate anything you have to add on the literature bubble, anything you know about them, or just stuff that comes to your mind. Let me know if you see this. Where's it at? Okay. Are you seeing that?
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So I'll read out the odds. You can take the evens. Let me just, any notes we want to make, we can do that. So
sorry, can you repeat that?
So I'll read off the name and mojo of the odd numbers, and then you can do,
okay.
do the evens. We'll take turns. Okay, so the first one is Sinai, Elaine, and Aaron. And this one was very surprising to me. It helps to educate you on what a mojo is all about, because just the title of her famous work, The Highly Sensitive Person, I wasn't thinking Zenai, but that should be.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Also, I think I mentioned in the email as well that there's actually quite a few Zenai females authors that are well known, and some of their books are so.
Yeah, I don't think I ever told you this, but at one point, you know that post back with STEM where he had this list of people and the lists by Mojo and that kind of stuff. At one point, I started doing something similar for the people who are already in the authors, and I found quite a few Zenai female writers.
Okay.
But most of them were nonfiction. Like there weren't. I think there was only one or two fiction that I found.
Gotcha. Yeah. That.
I never finished that project, by the way. It's a lot of Vi for me, so it's a bit overwhelming. But yeah.
But anything that you may remember from that would be great to throw forward if you have
Yeah.
that in mind. But yeah, on that, there have been, as I've gone deeper here, more Xeni ladies in fiction, and then also stories that have a very human interest
Right.
focus. Very cool. All right, next one will be yours.
Okay. Okay, Vi G. Russell Baker, Pulitzer Prize winner of Growing Up.
Nice. And yourself, are you in? It seems like you have an interest in both the fiction and the nonfiction, also poetry.
Yeah, I don't, to be honest, I actually don't read poetry, but I'm aware of a few of the big names in poetry.
Gotcha.
Is he a poet or
No, I think he's.
fiction?
I think maybe nonfiction.
Okay.
Most of IG males have been nonfiction, like biographies and so forth.
All of the Vi Alpha that I found when I started that thing that I told you about were, I think except for like one or two, they were almost all nonfiction.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
There seems to be more crossover with the females. There's a few Vaiji females that do both nonfiction, which you kind of expect a bit from the journalist.
I think I found, I hadn't finished that thing, but I didn't find many Vaiji females, so I couldn't like suss out a pattern or anything.
Yeah, definitely. The Vaiji ladies are one
more
thing we don't have a lot of right now.
Mm-hmm.
But we're getting more. We're getting more, and actually, the authors and politicians, the main place we're getting them, but their numbers are still low. Alrighty. For 3. This is one of yours.
Oh, yeah, he's Nijai. Interesting.
Nijai James Baldwin, novelist focusing on racism and civil rights. Have you read any of his, or how were you?
I started years ago. I read like half of one of his books, and I had a hard time getting into it just because he writes about African Americans in the U.S. in the 1960s, and I just like I know some things about it from like history classes and things like that, but I don't relate. I felt like I didn't relate enough to the characters and to the setting to really get into it. And I don't know if that's my fault for not being empathetic or not empathetic enough, or his deficiency as an author, or both of those things. So
Gotcha.
But he is like very well regarded. I'm slightly surprised. I would have gone with Naji for him.
Interesting. Why would you suspect that?
Well, this is kind of a shitty reason, but just Nijai tend to write more fantasy, sci-fi, things that are more out of the ordinary. His work reminds me of some Naiji authors where it's very, I'm not saying all Naiji write like this, but some Naiji are very into reality and into getting into the characters' heads and getting into their psyche and just that kind of a thing.
Gotcha. Is it also perhaps the, I don't know, but I'm just guessing from the descriptor, is it a bit more, say, maybe politically charged or pointed and making a message or something? Because sometimes Naiji have that.
Yeah, it's a bit of that, and just the fact that he's regarded as this leader. Not that adaptives can't be leaders or can't,
Sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, I know what you mean. Sometimes that's one of the things I love about the Mojiri. It lets you kind of correct anything you may have been thinking. Like I'm having to update my understanding of Xeni female, and I'm glad.
Right.
It's much more holistic.
Mm-hmm.
One thing also too is that I know that with the Nijai, I was talking to Bruno about it in music, but I think it's going to also apply to authors as well. Is in at least the males, they don't tend to be playing the lead roles as much. They're more supporting or comic relief. But in music, they take a lead role much more. And I imagine, obviously, in authors, being all their voice, they're probably going to be more in the lead role.
Right.
All right. It's fun. Next one is yours.
Nijai Eric Fromm, psychologist and author.
And he was.
I have a bunch of his books on my to-read list. I haven't actually read anything from him.
What is it about him that put him on your to-read list?
It was, from what I remember, it's just a lot of psychologists, at least, especially nowadays with psychiatry, a lot of it is like, oh, these people have these symptoms and it's this disorder and blah, blah, blah. And he's, from what I remember, he's one of the few psychologists that talks about how society makes people sick instead of just talking about like individual people as if they're like floating around in space uninfluenced by their environment. And he just has this holistic perspective.
Nice.
And I remember thinking that's interesting and I want to read more about that. So
definitely, I agree. And so he's one that's known for that, because I know that's something that's becoming more popular now. Was he a pioneer of that?
Yeah.
Because that's not been too recent. I mean, I think that for a long time that was kind of considered like a crazy idea, that it was society that might be the issue rather than the so.
Right. Yeah. Interesting.
But does he have a work that he's well known for? That's something else too. If you happen to know that, I can plug those in. Is there anything?
I can look it up if you want me to. I can't remember off the top of my head.
Oh, no worries. Anything like that comes to you, just throw it at me and I'll jot it down.
Sure.
All right. Here's one of those I'm talking about. Zenai Ellen Gilchrist, author, Rhoda, A Life in Stories. Although maybe that's nonfiction, but still seems like a very interest I'm gathering from the title.
Right.
I don't know much about her. Have you heard her?
No, I haven't.
This is yours.
Nijai Allegra Goodman, author, Catterskill Falls.
Got that classic Nijai look. And one thing, Nijai, the objective mojos tend to misread as subjective more than any other, but you can really see that in the music bubble, for example, that sensitivity and sort of pulling away is pronounced, but I think it's going to be maybe more pronounced in authors. It's a very reclusive lifestyle.
Right.
Do you find that challenging at all with your writing, being objective, like how much time you need to spend alone or in your head?
That's an interesting question. Well, I found ways to make it a slightly more social activity. I started this group that meets once every 2 weeks, and we get together in a coffee shop, and we do like these creative writing exercises together as a group, and then we have like quiet time to each work on our own thing. And I find that things like that help sort of balance it out a bit better.
Gotcha. That's one thing I've always found fascinating is I know with the Nijai is the abstracting is why they can seem like they're subjective, because they can sort of pull in with themselves even though they're taking in outer stimulus. I'm curious, again, more of it later, but if you could think at all, probably an ongoing topic, is how that abstraction works when you're reading, because I know a lot of Nijai are very big into books. It's a pretty popular pastime. It seems to be not like de-energizing for them, as if they're going into modulation or over subjective use. It seems to feed their need.
Right. I think it's because I can't remember which video it was, but in some video you said that Ni is like, it starts with one point and it's like thunder or lightning and it just expands out.
Yeah.
And so I find sometimes when I'm reading, even if like there's nothing like difficult that I don't understand or anything, like I'm fine with everything, sometimes I have to put the book down because there's something that reminded me of something else that reminded me of something else, and I need like a minute to like process all the connections and everything that's related to everything. So.
And is that pleasurable?
Yeah.
Alrighty. Next one's mine. I think it's one you were asked about as well. She's well known as that.
Interesting. I watched part of her video because one of the ones I submitted was with George R. Martin. I actually thought she was Jai Ni because her articulation was so heavy.
Interesting.
Yeah. Like it was really pronounced with her.
I'll take a look at her.
Yeah. Like I know there's Nijai obviously outnumbers Jai Ni considerably in writing, but still.
Yeah. I would imagine that strong Jai use is also going to be a bit of a theme among the authors, I would imagine.
Right.
That's something we talk about later as well, is like as far as like the characters and things of that nature, is how Nijai comes about from it. I find that fascinating. So then this is Nijai Robin Hobb, fantasy author. She's done something famous, hasn't she? Like.
Yeah, she's done. I don't know what the series is called, but I think the first one is called The Assassin's Quest. And are you familiar with Ender's Game at all?
I believe I read that growing up, and I think I saw the movie as well. On my memory, I
Okay.
the issue. I think
Okay.
Assassin's what?
It's similar to that in the sense that it's like a more fantasy version of that in a sense. I don't know if it was inspired by it. The Assassin's Quest, I think it is.
Oh, thank you.
Not quite, yeah. But it's about a guy who is like trained to be an assassin, and it's about like his inner struggle and the whole thing with that.
That's something I find interesting too, is that in well, I guess you see it in music as well because there is some writing, but with writing, obviously, it's right on because there seems to be a strong connection to one's other in writing. Like a lot of times, the Naiji authors, they'll really get into it seems like Nijai characters and vice versa. Nijai authors really like to write about Naiji characters.
Right.
But there is that music as well, although music tends to be a little more oriented on the self. All right. On to you.
Okay. Zenai Catherine Reinheid, author Walter's Purple Heart.
Yeah, just by these titles, it seems like it's pretty emotional.
Yeah, it seems yeah, interesting.
All right. I think this is one of yours.
Yep.
By Norton Juster, children's fiction author known for The Phantom Toll Booth. Have you read that?
I have. I actually, when I was in grade 2, our teacher read it to us, and it's one of those like children's books that just sticks with you or it stuck with me from my childhood. And I reread it a while back, like as an adult, and it's very playful and like very well written.
Oh, what is it about?
It's about this guy, a little boy who's really bored, and he goes home from school one day and he finds this giant box and he opens it, and there's like a sort of car with like instructions, and he starts like driving it, and he goes through these portals to like other worlds.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, those things really stay with you. I remember, my memory's really bad, but certain things like pop up. There's one, I wish I could find out who wrote this. Probably not someone really famous, but it was a cat that finds a spaceship and then goes into outer space and becomes like a humanoid cat with human intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
And then has these adventures and then comes back to Earth and has to go back into its normal cat body, but it still has the intelligence it gained in outer space and has to see the world that way. It's a short book, a children's book, but I don't know, something about that really struck me. I read that many
times. Sounds interesting.
I remember I would look around at cats differently after that book. I never looked at cats the same way. I was like, are you one?
Yeah. It reminds me a bit of, I mean, obviously they're different, but a bit of Winnie the Pooh, because it also has like animals that go on adventures and then they go back to being stuffed animals. And
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Oh, who wrote Winnie the Pooh? We should get that person.
A. Milne. I'm not sure if there's footage of her though. That's the issue.
Okay. Gotcha.
That's an issue with a lot of authors. Like a lot of classical authors were alive or lived most of their lives before video was really a big thing.
Yeah. And in general, even nowadays, they're more reluctant to go on camera compared to other careers. But it's getting more so. There's more YouTube channels that are like focused on authors and giving time to shine. I like that. All righty. Next one up is yours here.
Okay. Vaiji, Tracy Kidder, Pulitzer Prize winners, runners-up for general nonfiction. 1982, The Soul of a New Machine.
I'm trying to figure out what that would probably be, but I don't even know. But I'm gathering. Actually, you know what? I can't even hazard a guess on that. But it's a nonfiction.
Right, it says nonfiction, so.
Okay, here we got Zenai Jamaica Kincaid, author, the autobiography of my mother.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a lot of Zenai compared to, say, Nijez, but the few that are in there are fairly prominent.
Yeah, and they're often women of color or people of color, it seems.
Yeah, interesting that way. Well, that's something we in the pop culture in general is that the say African American portion of the pop culture bubbles tend to be heavily weighted with both the G alpha, the G nine, and the G vi.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking that's a combination of in their own culture, perhaps certain mojos are more, lionized or idealized than others.
Right.
And then perhaps also that may be something that other cultures expect, which is, I think something needs to be worked on. But
interesting.
This is one you were asking about.
Vijay Leslie McSpadden, memoirist, mother of Michael Brown.
And Michael Brown, remind me what that's about?
He was one of the young black men who was killed by a police officer. I'm ashamed to say I forget which incident it was because there were so many of them.
Yeah.
So she wrote a memoir about that and about her grieving and bereavement and things like that.
Did you happen to read it, or are you just aware of it?
No, I recently became aware of it because there was this thing on Facebook about there was a white mother of some guy who went and did a school shooting, and she also wrote a memoir, and her memoir got like very positive reviews on Amazon, and everybody felt sorry for her, and they were like, oh, there was nothing you could have done, it was all his fault, you did the best you could. And then with this woman, with Leslie McSpadden, she wrote her memoir, and people on Amazon were giving it mixed reviews, and some of the people who were writing the bad reviews were saying like, oh, it's your fault, you raised a thug, like it's his fault he got killed by that police officer. So I just saw that and became aware that that memoir exists. It's on my to-read list, but I haven't had a chance yet.
Yeah, if you happen to read it, I'd be curious on what stylings a Vijay author brings to the table.
Yeah. From when I was doing that project that I told you about, I only found a few Vijay, and some of them I had to take off the list because they had written like cookbooks, which I don't really put in the same category as like other books because it's a different set of skills. And then two of them were.
We will. Our plan is to include all of them. I know what you mean. I have the same bias myself.
Right.
You're saying?
Oh, I was just also going to say that out of like the 4 or 5 that I found, 2 of them were ex-porn performers, and they had written memoirs about like their experiences with that. So
memoirs and cookbooks so far.
Yeah, and I can't remember if there was anything like regular fiction, or I guess this would be an example of nonfiction.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Yeah, I do that for some. I have to really do. This will help me grow that way. Is the things like that? The cookbooks, I have to include them as well. There's also like military history. There's a few bodies you can do that. Like they count too. It's not my thing at all. But I'm like, okay.
Right. Yeah. No, the reason I didn't include the cookbooks wasn't because I don't think they're valuable. I collect cookbooks myself, so I like them. It's just that to put together a cookbook, you have to test a lot of recipes, and I think the skill is more in that instead of in the craft of writing. So that's why I made that distinction. But I think that obviously there's a place for cookbooks as well.
Yeah, I wonder if any of them get into. I know some of the Vijay, celebrity chefs you see on the Food Network and so forth. Sometimes it's just all about the recipes, but sometimes it's like a lifestyle. They kind of brand a lifestyle, so maybe there's some of that in there as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember I submitted 2 vegan cookbook authors who are like somewhat well known in the vegan community, and both of them were Xeni females. I found that really interesting. That was unexpected.
I know. What's unexpected but kind of cool is there's actually a significant crossover between Xeni and Nijai when it comes to activism and certain kind of causes and things that like need someone to talk about it. I'm still tracking what exactly that is, other than they're both objective and interpretive, and have Z.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, but I think in activism you see more Xeni and Nijai than Naiji ladies, for example. That would surprise me because Naiji ladies.
There are some Naiji. There's what's her name? Gloria Steinem is Naiji.
Oh yeah,
She's
so
well
there's,
known.
there's
Yeah.
some big names in there, but the numbers aren't as high as I would have thought. But
Yeah.
live and learn. All right, going here. All right, so okay, here's a Baiji lady.
Okay.
Baiji Diane McWhorter, and she's nonfiction. Carry Me Home, about civil rights. Oh, cool.
I have a question, and I apologize if this is like a stupid or noob question.
No,
For the Vaiji lady, if you could go back to her.
yes.
Okay, I'm just seeing Leslie McSpadden for some. Oh, okay, there she is. Her face is kind of like long and elongated. Is that like a Vi Alpha thing or a Jez Hunter thing, or am I imagining it? Or
No, you're not imagining it. This is something actually that I've been discussing with Glenn a little bit in Fitness Bubble. So are you familiar with the classic ectomorph, endomorph, mesomorph thingy?
I don't think so.
Body types, so basically some body types are predisposed to being muscular or thin or a little heavy.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Long story short, I think actually what they're trying to track is 4 quadrants of the psyche. There is a strong correlation in basic body structure and the 4 quadrants. So in general, subjectives tend to have more elongation in the limbs and in the face, and there tends to be more like a more compactedness in the hands and the face with objectives. So that's true. Although sometimes it gets tricky, like in politics, there's a preference we call the power head. So even the Bi Alpha in other bubbles tend to have a long face like her, but in politics, a lot of times, I don't know what it is, they favor people with big heads. But no, you definitely are tracking something there.
Yeah.
All right. Speaking of which, she's got that too. And that one's yours too?
Okay, I just see you right now. I don't see it.
Oh, my bad. Sometimes I clicked the wrong thing. Here we go. There we go.
Okay. Naiji, I'm not sure if it's Jojo or Hoho Moyes, novelist Me Before You. I'm embarrassed that I don't know how to pronounce her name because her novel is actually like a bestseller. But I've only ever seen it written. I haven't read it. It's like, it's romance and it's not really what I usually read. But I think there's a movie that's about to come out based on the book.
And you said Yo-Yo Moyes, does she have a background? Because you mentioned the Latin American. Is she part of that in any way, or is that a separate thing?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay, gotcha. What genres are your normal preferences?
It's kind of changed over time. Nowadays, I read like a lot of, I read a mix of fantasy and like classical literature, if that makes sense. But yeah, but it's changed over the years. Like there was a period where I almost exclusively read like feminist books and like, there was a time when I read like more quote unquote like trashier, like mainstream fiction. So I've gone through like a
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right. Next one up. Another Naiji lady. Naiji Alice Munro, author.
Yeah.
Do you know her?
Yes, I do. She won the Nobel Prize in Literature just a couple years ago. And she's Canadian. She's fairly well known in Canada. And she writes about a lot of like small town Canadian like stories and situations and things like that. She's known for her short stories.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Thank you. Let's see. Here we go. That's a biggie.
Okay. All right. Nijai Pablo Neruda, Chilean author and poet, Nobel Prize in Literature.
He's a legend, isn't he?
Yeah, he's pretty big. I've only recently, I'm reading a book right now by a Latin American author, and it's like among the first. Yeah, but it's interesting because, what was his name? I'm pulling like a brain freeze right now. But basically there were 2 authors. One was Zinai and one was Nizai. And they were both from Latin America, and I just found that interesting. And then there was Carlos Osako that I found in the database who was Vaiji, if there was like some kind of trend in Latin American literature where there's more non-Nijez authors. So it's an author as well.
Yeah, so we'll have to track that. I'm curious.
Yeah.
I guess all parts of the world have famous authors, but in the West, I guess it's what, European, Russian, South American. Is there other major contingents?
Like another like cultural sphere.
Yeah,
Um,
obviously Asian, but I'm not as familiar with those.
I'm somewhat familiar with some Japanese authors.
Oh, cool. So
Yeah,
maybe,
and I'll probably send you more to look at in the future.
that would be good. That would be good.
Yeah.
I don't have much there at all. Oh, on him. Did you ever see a movie called Il Postino?
No, I don't think so.
It's a pretty good indie movie. It's like sort of a romance, and it's about
Mhm.
a postman who's trying to woo his who's out of his league, and
Mhm.
I don't know if it's a true story or not. I think it's made up, but he on his postal route he delivers to Pablo Neruda, and Pablo he kind of counsels him on love. So I don't know, is maybe Pablo is for poetry involving love?
I haven't read his stuff, so I actually wouldn't know.
Okay, I'm just making that guess because he kind of played love doctor to the postman.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Nijai Grace Paley, Pulitzer for fiction. Yeah, she looks happy but pensive.
Hmm.
That's when you were asking about.
Yeah.
You go read that one out when you get a chance.
No, I haven't. I read the description for some of his books, and like, it just sounded like it was written from a very masculine point of view and like almost kind of sexist. So that kind of discouraged me or made me kind of lose interest. But he is a bit of a big name, so I thought it would be good to have him.
Gotcha. That makes sense. But what was it about it that made you think that?
I honestly don't remember. It was something about dating, but just the way it was described made it sound like very like, I don't know, dudeish, but in like a bad kind of way.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Boo.
Well, I think he was writing in like, I don't remember if it was the 60s but it was a while ago. Like he was writing when more Jewish Americans were still coming to the US, or Jewish people were coming to the US from Europe. So it was in some ways. So maybe you could excuse it on those grounds.
Well, I think.
I don't think he intentionally wrote anything like bad to be like, hey, like I'm a sexist douche. Like I think he was just doing the best that he could with the knowledge that he had at the time, and certain things that aren't acceptable now were more acceptable back then. So. Gotcha.
Yeah, still not right though. Yeah, I hear you. It's kind of like manslaughter versus Murn the First. It's like unintentional douchiness, a little less, but still bad.
Yeah.
Alrighty, here's a Jaini. Jaini Anita Shreve, author, The Pilot's Wife.
Interesting.
Yeah, and you can see the more heaviness in the eyes has that kind of gauzy quality that the towers have.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know anything about her though.
Yeah, I haven't heard of her either. It's interesting though, because she's Jez Alpha, but the emoting is kind of, it still looks a little bit limited. Like Jai, generally, from what I've seen, looks a little bit less expressive than G in a way.
Oh, definitely. Less expressive and sort of less comfortable.
Yeah.
Interesting. All right, last one here.
Okay. Z9, another Z9 lady. Susan Strait, author. I've been in Sorrow's kitchen and licked out all the pots.
Just the title of that, exactly what it is. I went in expecting her to be a G9 for some reason. Kind of like Maya Angelou's I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings.
Yeah, something like that, yeah. Interesting.
Alrighty, so those are the samples I had to drop today.
Okay.
Too long if you had to jet, but I did have a few questions I was curious about asking you.
Sure.
Who are some of your favorite authors?
That's a big question. One, well, I actually didn't, I used to be really bad. I couldn't read for a very long time. Like I could barely read. I was very bad at concentrating and just sitting still and reading a book.
Right.
That changed when I read the Harry Potter series, which has been like among my favorites ever since. So J.K. Rowling is like very close to my heart for that reason. Yeah, other than
I
that,
wonder about is the abstraction, like how Nietzsche can really get into writing. I was wondering because I also heard that Nietzsche can be fidgety and have a hard time concentrating. I was curious how that was reconciled. What was it about the Harry
yeah,
Potter that did you do that?
yeah, it was because the plot was very interesting. It was fantasy, which I think appeals to a lot of Nietzsche. And also the way that the first book starts, like the titles are all Harry Potter and this, Harry Potter and that, but the first chapter of the first book starts off with a family you find out they're related to him, but you don't know that at first. And it's just this random family and you're like, but it says Harry Potter on the title. Like I want to figure out what's going on and like who these people are and what this is all about. So for some reason that drew me in right away.
Interesting. Now on that, it's interesting that not only did it get you in, but the Harry Potter is a series. There's quite a few. Is that common for you to enjoy a series, or was that unusual? Because that's not just concentrating for one book. That's for like how many are there? 8? Oh, hello, hello. Oh, maybe she fell off. No? Okay. All right, world. I think that is our broadcast for today. I had a lot of fun hanging out with Maya and I learned a lot. I look forward to doing more in the future. Okay. I'll see everyone next time. Hello?
Hey there.
Ah, you're back. Okay, cool.
Yeah, you froze up. Yeah, you also froze up on my end, so I don't know what was going on.
Cool. But you were saying?
So yeah, so I was just saying that aspect of the first chapter drew me in. That it says Harry Potter on the title, but it's about this other family, and you want to find out how they're going to get linked and what's going to happen, and yeah. And you started asking me something, but
Yeah, I was actually like, because that's a quite jump. You went from not being able to really concentrate on books in general, but then into a series that has like several books. That's a long attention span.
yeah.
Is that the only one that has grabbed you for like a series length, or has it been any other series that had that kind of?
Any other series? Off the top of my head, I can't think of any series that I've gotten heavily into. But I think that might be partly coincidence, just because like now I can read a lot more than I could before. So, like if I wanted to get into a series now, I don't think that would be as much of a problem.
Gotcha.
But it's just, yeah, for whatever reason, I haven't gotten into a lot of series. I tried reading the Game of Thrones series recently, and there were just so many characters, and I couldn't keep track of everybody, and I was confused. So,
On that, have you checked out the show at all?
no, I haven't. I heard it's very different from the books, though.
Well, some parts different, but I think overall they just have to move quickly as far as the explanations and so forth, because there's so much, as you read it, so much detail.
Right.
They can't capture all that. But I think they do a pretty good job. In general, do you enjoy adaptations of books, or are you against them? Or
I'm not against them on principle. I think it depends. I've seen some that are done really well, and some that leave a lot to be desired. It's tough when it's like a book that's very introspective and a lot of the character thinking, and like that's kind of hard to adapt well into a movie.
definitely, I think most attempts to capture like Kafka and those kind of things, they pretty much always fail.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that is our time for today. I really enjoyed talking with you and look forward to doing it again next week, if that's cool.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So Friday, same time, is that okay for you? Or
Does that work?
yeah, yeah.
Okay, perfect. Sounds great. Thank you
Yeah,
very much.
yeah, thanks.
And anything you have, just go ahead and send it to me and I'll add it to our list.